This week in Boston is at Berklee College of Music, and also at the new school in Cambridge we had the Lennie Tristano Centennial, which was a 100th year celebration of his birth. We have lectures and concerts, and it's a real great, and I think to me meaningful validation of everything he was doing. I'd like to introduce the Venerable Harvey Diamond. Woo! Harvey was a fellow student of mine with Lennie Tristano way back in the day, and we thought we'd like to share some stories of Lennie and reminiscences, maybe a little bit about his piano teaching.
Absolutely.
For those of you that don't know, Lennie was one of the great jazz pianists of all time, and he lived from 1919 until 1978, and had a very active teaching studio in Hollis, Queens.
We felt that teaching was the most important thing that you could do.
Wow.
In this life.
Wow.
That's what he told me.
Did he explain it?
And he just said to me, the great player that he was and the great improviser, he did say to me that he felt like teaching was really his thing.
Wow.
Pretty wild for somebody.
He told me that teaching was an art.
I can get with
And
that.
it was very rewarding.
I can get with that.
Those were his words. And I mean, certainly for me, I think for you too, the model of being 15 or 16 years old and going to see Lennie Tristano every week, it just set up a model for the rest of my life.
That's right. No. Even when I didn't practice, I'd always go. And I always used to think of it to myself like I had to. It brought me back to the truth. That's how I used to think about it when I left, you know.
And he was so beautiful to us. I mean, he was, you know, I often reflect that he had a very difficult life with his blindness and illnesses and
Right.
difficult situations in his personal life and things. And he yet was able to guide us all.
That's right.
And that's a special, amazing person who is that has his own struggle going on, and yet is able to reach out and reach a whole generation of players and set a whole guideline for pianists for the next who knows long. I was fortunate enough to meet Lennie when I was 15 years old and study with him from 1971 to 1978. Harvey, when did you meet Lennie?
I met Lennie in 1968 and studied with him. I saw him 3 days before he passed away,
Really?
78.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, how did you hear about Lennie?
I was playing at a club here in Boston with Alan Broadbent.
Wonderful.
And
Great
that's
pianist.
how I initially heard about Lennie. I believe that Alan Broadbent at the time was studying with the saxophone player Lennie Popkin,
Okay.
who was at that time studying with Lennie Tristano. And that's how I first heard about Lennie Tristano, and then so I started seeing Lennie Tristano, and then Alan and I started going down to New York together. I think with me, you know, it varied. Sometimes it was 20 minutes.
20 minutes?
Sometimes it might go a half hour, sometimes 40,
Yeah.
and talk a little bit, but in that area, between 20 and...
We would come in to Lennie's house. Lennie it was a 3-story house at the time.
Right.
And there was a period of time where Warren Marsh lived on one floor, Sonny Dallas lived on another, and Lennie lived on another one. And you'd walk up the stairs into Lennie's studio, and there'd be a waiting room off to the right. And Lennie was typically, I would say, at least 1 to 2 hours late for his lessons, at least when I was there.
Yeah, right.
So the waiting room was always full of people waiting for lessons, but it was a great scene. And one of the things about Lennie that was so memorable was he had a very tight-knit community of people that were involved with him, studying, playing. And we grew up in that scene. So it's unusual to have that kind of support system, and also a place to play and rehearse and practice and try out ideas. And Lennie was like the godfather of the whole scene. And so you'd go in, have a lesson, sit in the waiting room for a couple hours, talk to friends, and then he'd call you in. And the first thing you notice about being with Lennie, of course, is he was blind. And I got used to that very quickly. What about you?
Well, my feeling was that he, even though he was blind, he spoke like he wasn't blind.
Yeah.
First question he asked me, I know at my very first lesson, the minute I walked in, he said to me, I had already been playing in San Francisco. I came from California. So he said to me, so you want to play jazz, huh? Even though I played all through college. We were playing 6 nights a week in San Francisco. And I said yes. And he first said to me, don't expect to survive.
Wow, beautiful.
From playing jazz.
Boy, he laid it right out there at the beginning.
I didn't even think about that, or that aspect of it. That was I do remember that as being the very first thing.
Okay, I'll tell you the very first thing he told me.
Go ahead.
I called him up from the Berklee dormitory. I was 15, going to Berklee in the summer, and I was sitting in the library, and there was a lady across from me with a copy of the New Tristano, and I had read about Lennie in the book Jazz Masters of the 50s, and knew about him, and I was really in search of a teacher at that time. So I struck up a conversation. I knew the record, the New Tristano, and this beautiful lady, and I don't know who she is to this day, said, I am studying with him, and here is his phone number.
Great.
And I was 15 years old. I went down into the bowels of the dormitory at Berklee to a payphone, and I called him up, and the phone rang, and I said, Mr. Tristano, and he goes, call me Lennie. I said, I need help. He said, what kind of help do you need? I said, pianistic help. He said, this is what you do. When you get back from Berklee, you come over to my house. I'm in Queens, and I'm going to tell you how I'm going to rip you off, and you can tell me to go fuck myself. That was the first thing I ever heard from him. And he was open to everything you'd bring in, right? I mean...
Totally open, yeah.
I brought him in, he asked me, like, what do young people listen to? He was always curious about what was happening in the world and musically. And so I brought him a Grateful Dead record. And I lent it to him for a week.
Right.
And I gave him Dark Star, which is one of my favorite Grateful Dead pieces. And I thought, man, this is really going to, he's going to dig this. I mean, he's got to hear us improvise and all this. And I came back the next week and said, well, how'd you like it? And he started pacing in the studio, and he said, it's so distorted, man. Oh, man. His opinions about everything were amazing, and he just shot right from the hip.
During the lesson, if his phone was ringing, he first got up and went and put it in his closet. He opened the closet door, put it in his closet. Yeah. Then if it kept ringing and you could hear it, in the closet was a, what do I want to say? Drawers, the whole 6 drawers. So if the phone kept ringing, you'd get up, get the phone, and not just leave it in the closet, but open the door and put it in the drawer.
Right. Now, but he would teach, right, 3 days a week? Remember him teaching 3 days a week?
When I was with him? I don't know.
When I was with him, he was teaching 3 3 days, right?
I think that's probably
maybe
true.
4.
Maybe I did. Yeah,
3 or 4. And the phone would go in the closet from Thursday until Monday.
And then in the drawer, I just remember all of him doing that, you know.
He told me once that it was very difficult for him to, he evidently had some form of 24-hour, I forget what they call it. There's if you're blind, your circadian rhythms are difficult because you don't have the visual cues. He said it was hard to make appointments with people for him because if it was Thursday, he still might be up from Monday.
Yeah, I remember him telling me he didn't sleep much.
He didn't sleep. Because the great thing about Lennie, again, is he had this real curriculum for piano. And although he wouldn't follow it exactly with everybody, he was taking into account the total musician. And he wanted to create a musician that had a strong foundation of technique and ear training and theory. He wanted to give you the whole package. So you couldn't leave from a lesson without having specific exercises. I studied with him for about 6 months. I was 16 years old, and we had gone through a lot of these things, and it came to a kind of a point where I could improvise over chords, and kind of like the end of this particular level. Right. So I don't know, he goes, okay, now Dave, you're in Yankee Stadium, and there are 78,000 screaming fans, and you have one chorus. 1, 2, 3, 4, go. And I'd play something lame, you know, and he goes, that was okay. But remember, when you're playing in front of an audience, you can't say, you should have heard me yesterday.
Well, I think that's another great aspect that he said. Every playing time is a new time.
Beautiful.
And it doesn't matter what you played 10 minutes ago. It only matters what you...
And tell us what you said to me. You didn't have to impress anybody?
Oh, yeah. Then he said, it only matters what you play right now. And he said, well, he did say to me, you don't have to prove anything to anybody.
You walked into his studio. He was sitting usually on like a kind of a, what would you call it, like a recliner kind of a thing?
I think so. I remember that's what it was
like. Like a sofa recliner thing? Kind of at the end of the room. He had a Baldwin piano in his teaching studio. And he had basically 2 different types of things, maybe 3, that he would do as a lesson. One of the things about Lennie that was so fantastic and why he was such a successful teacher is that he was one of the first people that came up with the pedagogy for teaching jazz. And he, of course, he worked with each person separately and differently because everyone's an individual.
Exactly right.
But he did have an approach to teaching where he gave the student subjects to learn. So it was not at all random. There was basically technique to do. There was voicing, some kind of theory.
Absolutely.
Playing on tunes, improvising, arranging chords in the left hand.
Yes.
And then always you couldn't leave without singing a record.
Right. I always felt like, look, he was out to help you play and get out whatever music was inside you as an individual. Absolutely. Even though there was specific stuff to work on. When you really think about it, it's nothing that's mysterious from the heavens. It's like all right in front of us, but it's stuff that I know I would have never thought about doing my whole life. I could have lived to be 150. I would have never thought about it.
Right. The first time I had the experience of what it really was like was, especially if you were new, but it could happen at any time, he had a way where he could tune into where you were and he could give you the next concept. He could, if there was something wrong with it.
Absolutely.
Like I remember I was practicing all day,
Yeah.
Right? And there was just something wrong. I mean, there was something that wasn't happening.
Right.
And I went into Lennie's room, and my playing wasn't happening, and he straightened it out in one afternoon. And it had to do with timing and the swing eighth feel and put it in the groove and all this stuff.
Right.
And I walk out, and I no longer have the problem.
Yeah, right.
Now that is heavy.
That is.
And that's what I love about teaching.
That's exactly right.
Is because
I feel the same way.
you can apply concepts to people's playing and make a huge difference. Right?
That's right. Yeah. There was one woman who used to study with me who just played free.
Just
Nothing
played
else.
free.
Totally free, no tunes. And I realized after the first this was I'll always remember her because she'd come in and sit down and play. I think I used to see people half hour, 40 minutes, 45 minutes, now I'm up to an hour.
This is one of your students.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
This was one of my students.
Okay, got it.
It just popped into my head though. So she was just playing free.
Right.
And so she'd just play and she'd get up and say bye. She'd say hi and bye. And I used to talk, and then I realized after about 2 lessons, my best bet was to never say a word.
Yeah.
And that's the way it went.
Wow.
She'd come, I wouldn't say a word, and her playing just kept getting better and better and better
Wow.
and better and better.
Savvy.
And I realized not to say a word.
Right.
That's where she was at, not to even talk.
There you go.
And her playing just got better all the time.
Amazing.
I was an unusual case, but that's just the way it went.
Well,
for her.
that's what she needed, right?
Right. See, that's the key, man.
So the pedagogy was you would learn the pieces of the puzzle, and then you got a chance to put the puzzle together in the way that you wanted.
Exactly right. It was like covering everything that goes into playing
Right.
without saying what to play and how to do it.
Right, and that was amazing.
Which is beautiful because that brings out
Right.
one's own individuality in their playing, which I would say that's what jazz is about.
Sure. In 7 years of studying with him, he never told me what note to play.
Beautiful, man. I could read.
Right? He never talked about chord scales. Or
Never.
Nothing.
Never.
And that
Never
was
a
just
word.
unusual. It worked somehow. I don't know how.
Yeah, never a word about
But
that.
somehow you didn't need it.
Absolutely.
So we have the technique, we have the theory, we have the ear training. Then when she got into improvising, that was a whole nother trip. So we invite you to listen to Lennie's music. Contact either of us if you want. And thank you for tuning in. Blessings, and keep swinging. Yeah, from Boston.